In a quiet little town surrounded by green hills, there was a cozy diner called the Rustic Spoon. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small place with creaky wooden floors, vinyl booths, and faded posters on the walls. But what it lacked in looks, it made up for in warmth and charm. Locals loved coming here not just for the food but also for the friendly faces that greeted them every day. One of those friendly faces belonged to a young woman named Emily Carter. She was in her late 20s with tired eyes but a smile that could light up the room. Life hadn't been easy for her. As a single mother raising her 6-year-old son, she worked long hours at the diner to make ends meet. Despite the challenges, Emily always found a way to stay positive. Her customers admired her for her kindness and hard work. Emily's son, Noah, was her whole world. He was a curious and bright boy who loved exploring everything around him. His biggest passion, though, was music. From the time he was old enough to walk, Noah had been drawn to sounds: the chirping of birds outside their window, the hum of the refrigerator, or even the rhythmic clatter of dishes in the diner kitchen. But what fascinated him most was the old upright piano tucked away in the corner of the diner. The piano was ancient, its surface scratched and keys yellowed with age. Nobody really knew how it ended up there. It had probably been left behind by a previous owner, but it added a certain charm to the place. Every chance he got, Noah would sit on the bench and press the keys, creating melodies that were more imaginative than polished. Sometimes other diners would stop eating to listen, amused by the little boy's enthusiasm. On one particularly busy evening, the diner buzzed with activity. Families filled the booths, couples shared plates of fries, and the waitstaff scurried back and forth, balancing trays laden with burgers and milkshakes. Emily was rushing between tables, refilling drinks and taking orders, when she noticed Noah standing near the piano. He looked frustrated, tugging at his shirt as if trying to figure something out. Curious, Emily walked over to see what was wrong. "Hey, buddy, what's going on?" she asked gently. Noah pointed to the top keys of the piano. "I can't reach them," he said, his voice tinged with disappointment. Emily knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Well, let's fix that, shall we?" Without thinking twice, she scooped him up and lifted him onto her shoulders. Noah giggled as he steadied himself, his tiny hands now hovering above the higher notes. From across the room, a man sitting alone by the window watched the scene unfold. He was dressed sharply in a tailored suit, his posture stiff and formal, compared to the casual vibe of the diner. The man's name was Charles Whitmore, though no one in the diner knew that yet. To everyone else, he was just another customer, an outsider who seemed oddly out of place among the chipped mugs and mismatched chairs. Charles had come to the diner almost on a whim. Normally, he spent his days in boardrooms or private jets, making decisions that affected millions of dollars. But tonight he wanted something different, something simple. So he chose this unremarkable spot, hoping to escape the noise of his high-powered life for a few hours. As he sipped his coffee, his gaze kept drifting toward Emily and Noah. There was something about the way the boy played, not perfectly, but with such pure joy, that captivated him. It reminded Charles of his own childhood, growing joyfully in a modest home where music had been a rare luxury. Watching Noah's fingers dance clumsily across the keys stirred memories he thought he'd forgotten. For a moment, Charles allowed himself to imagine what it must be like for Emily, to raise a child while working tirelessly to provide for him. He wondered how she managed to keep smiling despite the obvious struggles. And then, as quickly as these thoughts came, they vanished, replaced by the cold logic he usually relied on. After all, he reasoned, people faced hardships every day. Why should this moment feel any different? But deep down, something had shifted. Whether he realized it or not, Charles was beginning to see the world through a lens he hadn't used in years, one shaped by empathy rather than ambition. Little did he know, this brief encounter would set off a chain of events that would change lives, including his own, in ways he couldn't have predicted. As the night wore on, the diner grew quieter. Plates were cleared, bills were paid, and families headed home. Emily helped Noah climb down from the piano bench, thanking him for entertaining the guests. Unbeknownst to her, someone in the corner was already planning his next move, a move that would leave everyone talking long after the lights went out. As the diner began to wind down, Emily was busy wiping tables and stacking chairs. The dinner rush had ended, leaving behind a sense of calm that only came after a long day's work. Noah, now sitting quietly in a booth with a coloring book, occasionally glanced toward the piano as if hoping for another chance to play. But Emily knew they couldn't stay much longer. They had to get home, where piles of laundry and bills awaited them. Charles, still seated at his table by the window, watched the mother and son closely. He wasn't sure why he couldn't tear his eyes away from them. Maybe it was the way Emily moved, efficient yet graceful, her hands calloused from years of hard work but still gentle when she touched her son's shoulder. Or maybe it was Noah's unwavering determination, even when faced with obstacles like not being able to reach the piano keys. Whatever it was, Charles felt something stir inside him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. He tried to shake it off. After all, he was here for a simple meal, nothing more. Yet the image of Emily lifting Noah onto her shoulders replayed in his mind. It reminded him of a time when life was simpler, before money and power became the center of his existence. Back then his family didn't have much, but they found joy in small things. A song hummed together, a shared laugh over dinner. Those memories had faded over the years, buried under layers of meetings, deals, and deadlines. Now watching this young family brought those moments rushing back. Finally, Charles signaled for the check. As the waitress approached his table, he hesitated. Instead of handing over his credit card, he cleared his throat and asked, "Excuse me, do you know the woman who works here, the one with the boy?" The waitress nodded, looking curious. "Oh, you mean Emily? Yeah, she's been working here for a few years now. She's really nice, always has a smile on her face, even when things get tough." Charles nodded thoughtfully. "I see," he said, his voice low. "And the boy? He seems to love music." The waitress chuckled softly. "Yeah, that's Noah. He's always messing around with that old piano. We think it's cute, though. Keeps the place lively." For a moment, Charles considered letting it go. He could pay his bill, leave, and never think about this again. But something stopped him. Perhaps it was the memory of his younger self, dreaming of opportunities that seemed impossible. Or maybe it was the realization that despite all his wealth, he rarely used it to make a real difference in someone's life. Before he could second-guess himself, Charles stood up and walked toward Emily. She was bent over a table, scrubbing, at a stubborn stain when she noticed him approaching. At first she froze, unsure what to expect. Wealthy men in tailored suits weren't exactly regulars at the Rustic Spoon, and she wondered if she'd done something wrong. "Hi," Charles began, his tone polite but firm. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I just wanted to ask, your son, does he enjoy playing the piano?" Emily blinked, caught off guard by the question. For a brief moment she debated whether to answer honestly or politely brush him off. But there was something sincere in his expression, a mix of curiosity and admiration that put her at ease. "Yes," she replied, glancing at Noah, who was now engrossed in his coloring. "He loves music, always has. We don't have a piano at home, so he likes coming here to practice." Charles nodded slowly, his gaze shifting between Emily and Noah. "Does he take lessons?" he asked. Emily hesitated. The truth was they couldn't afford lessons, not with rent, groceries, and utilities eating up most of their income. But admitting that felt embarrassing, especially to a stranger. Still, she decided to be honest. "Not yet," she admitted. It's not in the budget right now, but we're hoping someday." There was a pause, heavy with unspoken words. Charles looked at her, seeing not just a waitress but a mother doing everything she could to give her child a better life. In that moment he made a decision, one that would shock everyone in the room. Reaching into his pocket, Charles pulled out an envelope. Inside were several crisp $100 bills, totaling $5,000. Without ceremony, he handed it to Emily. "For lessons," he said simply, his voice steady. Emily stared at the envelope, her heart pounding. I can't accept this, she stammered, pushing it back toward him. It's too much. But Charles held his ground, his expression unyielding. Please, he insisted, consider it an investment in his future. The entire diner fell silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, forks clattered onto plates, and heads turned to watch the exchange. Some patrons exchanged wide-eyed looks, while others whispered among themselves. Was this man serious? Who carried that kind of cash around casually? Emily felt overwhelmed, her cheeks flushing red. She wanted to refuse, to insist that she didn't need charity. But deep down, she knew how much this could mean for Noah, for both of them. It wasn't just about the money. It was about giving her son a chance to chase his dreams, something she feared might slip through their fingers without help. Thank you, she managed to say, her voice trembling. This means more than you know. Charles gave a slight nod, his lips curving into the faintest hint of a smile. Take care of him, he said before turning and walking toward the exit. Just like that, he was gone, disappearing into the night as quickly as he'd arrived. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then, the room erupted into murmurs. Diners speculated about who the mysterious man was and why he'd done such a thing. Some praised his generosity, calling him a hero. Others were skeptical, wondering if there was some hidden motive behind his actions. Meanwhile, Emily stood frozen, clutch, life-changing. Act from stranger. Emily's mind raced as she clutched the envelope, tightly. What had just happened? A complete stranger had walked into their lives and offered them a lifeline they desperately needed. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie. Yet, here she was, holding proof of his kindness in her hand. Noah tugged at her apron, pulling her attention back to the present. Mommy, who was that man? He asked innocently. I'm not sure, sweetie, Emily replied, kneeling down to meet his gaze. But he did something very kind for us tonight. Her words sparked a new wave of emotions within her. Gratitude, relief, and a tiny flicker of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, things were starting to look up for them. Little did she know, this act of generosity was only the beginning. The next morning, Emily woke up with the envelope still clutched in her hand. She hadn't been able to let it go, not even for a second. Throughout the night, her mind had raced with questions. Who was that man? Why had he chosen them? And most importantly, what did this mean for Noah? As sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of their tiny apartment, she sat at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope as if it might suddenly reveal its secrets. Noah, oblivious to the weight of the moment, happily munched on his cereal while humming one of the tunes he'd made up the day before. His innocence was both comforting and heart-wrenching. He didn't know how much this gift could change everything, or how much responsibility it carried. Emily finally opened the envelope and counted the bills inside. $5,000. It was more money than she'd ever held in her hands at once. Her first instinct was to return it. The idea of accepting such a large sum from a stranger felt wrong, almost like taking charity. But then reality set in. They lived paycheck to paycheck, barely scraping by. Rent was due in 2 weeks and the car needed repairs. Without help, there was no way she could afford piano lessons or anything else that might give Noah a chance to grow his talent. She sighed, deeply, running a hand through her hair. Okay, she whispered to herself. Let's do this. Later that day, after dropping Noah off at school, Emily drove to the music store in the next town over. It wasn't a place she normally visited, it was too expensive. But today, she walked in with purpose. A bell jingled as she pushed open the door and a middle-aged woman behind the counter looked up with a polite smile. Hi, can I help you? The woman asked. I'm looking for someone who teaches piano, Emily replied. My son has potential. I want him to learn properly. The woman nodded knowingly. You're in luck. Mrs. Anderson is one of the best teachers around. She works with kids all the time. Let me see if she's available. Within minutes, Emily found herself sitting across from Mrs. Anderson, a kind-eyed woman with silver hair and a warm demeanor. After explaining their situation, leaving out the part about the mysterious billionaire, Emily handed over a check for the first month's tuition. As they discussed schedules and lesson plans, a wave of relief washed over her. For the first time in years, she felt like she was doing something truly meaningful for her son. Meanwhile, news of Charles's generous act spread quickly. Word traveled fast in small towns, and by the end of the week, everyone seemed to know about the wealthy man who had walked into the Rustic Spoon and handed Emily an envelope full of cash. Some people praised him, calling him a modern-day hero. Others were skeptical, speculating that he must have ulterior motives. Rumors swirled, each version more exaggerated than the last. At the diner, Emily became the center of attention. Customers peppered her with questions. What did the man say? Did you recognize him? Are you going to keep the money? At first, Emily tried to brush it off, offering vague answers, but eventually she decided to tell the truth, at least part of it. He just wanted to help Noah, she explained during a rare break between tables. That's all. No strings attached. Her co-workers listened intently, some nodding in admiration, others shaking their heads in disbelief. One of the cooks, a gruff man named Joe, leaned against the counter and said, "If you ask me, that guy's got a soft spot. Rich folks don't usually care about people like us." Emily smiled faintly. She didn't know what Charles's reasons were, but she couldn't deny the impact of his actions. Thanks to him, Noah was now enrolled in weekly lessons with Mrs. Anderson. Each session brought visible progress. His fingers grew steadier, his melodies clearer. On weekends, he practiced diligently, pouring his heart into every note. Back in the city, Charles returned to his usual routine of meetings, phone calls, and endless paperwork. To the outside world, he appeared unchanged, focused, efficient, and unemotional. But inside, something was different. Images of Emily and Noah lingered in his mind, refusing to fade. He thought about the boy's face lighting up as he played, the piano, and Emily's quiet determination as she balanced work and motherhood. His advisors noticed the shift. During a strategy meeting, one of them cautiously broached the subject. "Sir, we've seen the coverage of your donation. Should we capitalize on this? Maybe issue a press release? Highlight your philanthropy?" Charles frowned, his irritation evident. "No," he said sharply. "This isn't about publicity." "But sir," the advisor pressed, "it's an opportunity to enhance your image. People love stories like this." "I said no," Charles repeated firmly, cutting off further discussion. He didn't elaborate, but his tone left no room for argument. This act wasn't about building his brand or improving his reputation. It was personal, a fleeting connection to a simpler time, a reminder of the values he'd nearly forgotten. Still, the experience stayed with him. Late at night, when the office was quiet and the city lights glowed outside his window, Charles allowed himself to reflect. He thought about his own childhood, the struggles, the sacrifices, the dreams he'd once nurtured. Somewhere along the way, those dreams had been replaced by ambition and success. Now, watching Emily and Noah reignited something within him. Perhaps it wasn't too late to rediscover it. Weeks turned into months, and Noah continued to thrive under Mrs. Anderson's guidance. His natural talent blossomed into skill, earning praise from his teacher and classmates alike. Emily marveled at his progress, often sitting quietly in the corner during lessons, tears pricking her eyes as she listened to him play. She couldn't believe how far they'd come in such a short time. One evening, after picking Noah up from a particularly successful lesson, Emily stopped at a park on their way home. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Noah ran ahead, laughing as he chased after leaves swirling in the breeze. Emily sat on a bench, watching him with a mix of pride and gratitude. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "Hey, Emily." She turned to see Sarah, a neighbor and close friend, approaching with a bag of groceries. They exchanged pleasantries before Sarah asked the question everyone seemed to be asking lately. "So, any word from that man? The one who gave you the money?" Emily shook her head. "Not really. He paid for the lessons, and that was it. I haven't heard from him since. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Strange, isn't it? I mean, why would someone do something like that and then disappear? Emily shrugged. I don't know. Maybe he didn't want anything in return, or maybe... She trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. Maybe what? Sarah prompted. Maybe he just needed to remind himself of something, Emily said softly. Something important. Sarah studied her for a moment, then nodded. Well, whoever he is, he changed your life. And Noah's. Emily smiled, her gaze drifting back to her son. Yeah, she murmured. He did. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the park, Emily felt a renewed sense of hope. Life was still hard, and challenges lay ahead. But for the first time in years, she believed they could overcome them, together. Months turned into years, and life for Emily and Noah began to transform in ways neither of them could have imagined. The mysterious envelope from Charles Whitmore wasn't just a financial boost. It was the spark that lit a fire under their dreams. For Noah, it opened doors he didn't even know existed. For Emily, it gave her the courage to believe that maybe, just maybe, they deserved more than the hand life had dealt them. Noah's progress with Mrs. Anderson was nothing short of remarkable. What started as clumsy tunes on an old diner piano soon evolved into something extraordinary. His teacher often remarked on his natural ear for music and his ability to express emotions through the keys. He has a gift, Mrs. Anderson told Emily one afternoon after a particularly moving performance. Not everyone has this kind of passion at such a young age. Emily beamed with pride, but also felt a pang of worry. As much as she wanted to support Noah's talent, she knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Music lessons were expensive, competitions required travel, and instruments cost far more than she could ever afford. Yet every time she doubted whether they could keep going, she reminded herself of the stranger who had believed in them when no one else did. While Noah focused on his music, Emily decided it was time to chase a dream of her own. For years, she dreamed of opening a small bakery, a cozy place where people could gather over fresh bread and sweet treats. It was a silly idea, she used to think, something only rich folks could pull off. But now, with some leftover money, from Charles's donation and her growing confidence, she began to take steps toward making it a reality. She spent evenings researching recipes, jotting down ideas, and sketching out designs for what her bakery might look like. On weekends, she practiced baking in their tiny kitchen, filling the apartment with the smell of cinnamon rolls and chocolate chip cookies. Noah loved helping her, especially when it came to taste testing. "Mommy, this is the best cookie I've ever had," he declared one Saturday morning, crumbs falling from his lips. "You're biased," Emily teased, ruffling his hair. But deep down she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this crazy idea could work. With the help of a local business owner who offered advice and a little bit of faith, Emily secured a small loan to cover startup costs. She found a run-down storefront near the edge of town, its faded sign reading vacant in peeling letters. To most people, it looked like a hopeless project. But to Emily, it was a blank canvas waiting to come alive. For months, she worked, tirelessly, balancing shifts at the diner with late-night renovations at the bakery. Friends and neighbors pitched in wherever they could, painting walls, installing shelves, and spreading word about her upcoming grand opening. When the day finally arrived, Emily stood behind the counter, her heart pounding as customers streamed in to sample her creations. The bakery quickly became a hit. People loved not only the food but also the warmth and care Emily poured into every detail. Her signature chocolate cake earned rave reviews, and her sourdough bread sold out within hours. For the first time in years, Emily felt like she was building something truly hers. Meanwhile, Noah's musical journey continued to flourish. He entered local competitions, earning accolades and scholarships that helped ease the financial burden. Each win brought him closer to his ultimate goal, playing on a stage big enough to share his music with the world. Emily attended every performance, cheering louder than anyone else in the audience. She saw how music transformed him, giving him confidence and joy that spilled over into other parts of his life. One evening, as they drove home from a regional competition where Noah had taken first place, Emily glanced at her son in the rearview mirror. "You know," she said softly, "you're amazing at this. I'm so proud of you." Noah grinned, still clutching his trophy. "Thanks, Mom. But I couldn't have done it without you. Or without that man." Emily's smile faltered slightly. They rarely talked about Charles anymore. He remained a shadowy figure in their story, someone who had appeared briefly and then vanished. Yet his presence lingered, a silent reminder of the kindness that had set them on this path. "I wonder if he knows how much he changed our lives," Noah mused aloud. Emily nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe someday we'll get to tell him." Back, in the city, Charles Whitmore sat in his penthouse office staring out at the skyline. Life had returned to its usual rhythm, meetings, deals, and endless phone calls, but something inside him had shifted. He thought often about Emily and Noah, wondering how they were doing. Occasionally, he searched online for updates about the boy who played the piano, though he never admitted it to anyone. His assistants noticed subtle changes in him. He seemed less impatient during meetings, more willing to listen to others' ideas. Once, during a charity gala, he surprised everyone by announcing a new initiative to fund arts programs for underprivileged children. Reporters swarmed him afterward, eager to learn more about his sudden interest in philanthropy. Charles brushed them off with vague answers, refusing to elaborate. Late one night, as he scrolled through emails before bed, a notification popped up on his screen. It was an invitation to attend a regional youth music competition. Attached was a note from Mrs. Anderson, Noah's teacher. "Your generosity made this possible," it read. "Please join us to celebrate Noah's incredible achievements." Charles stared at the message for a long time, his chest tightening with emotion. He hadn't expected gratitude. He certainly hadn't expected an invitation. But here it was, proof that his actions had mattered. After a moment's hesitation, he replied, "Thank you. I'll be there." The day of the competition arrived and the auditorium buzzed with excitement. Parents snapped photos, teachers whispered words of encouragement, and contestants paced nervously backstage. Emily arrived early, dressed in the nicest outfit she owned, her heart swelling with pride. Noah, calm and focused, adjusted his bow tie and flexed his fingers one last time before taking the stage. As the lights dimmed and the audience fell silent, a figure slipped quietly into an empty seat near the front row. Charles Whitmore scanned the crowd until his eyes landed on Emily. Their gazes met briefly and she blinked in surprise, unsure whether to stand up or stay seated. Instead, she gave him a small nod of acknowledgement, her lips curving into a grateful smile. When Noah began to play, the room seemed to hold its breath. His fingers danced across the keys with precision and grace, weaving a melody that spoke directly to the soul. Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she watched her son pour his heart into the performance. Beside her, Charles leaned forward slightly, captivated by the music and the boy who created it. By the end of the piece, the entire auditorium erupted into applause. Noah stood, bowing deeply as his cheeks flushed with pride. Emily wiped her tears, clapping harder than anyone else. And Charles, for the first time in years, allowed himself to feel something other than ambition or obligation. It was a sense of fulfillment, a quiet joy that came from knowing he'd made a difference. Afterward, as families mingled in the lobby, Emily approached Charles hesitantly. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "Almost didn't," Charles replied honestly, "but I'm glad I did." They stood there for a moment, two strangers connected by an act of kindness that had changed both their lives. Neither needed to say more. The bond between them was unspoken, yet undeniable. As Noah ran up to hug his mom, Charles smiled faintly. In that moment, he realized something important. Success wasn't measured in dollars or deals. It was measured in moments like these, moments that reminded him of what truly mattered. The music competition marked a turning point, not just for Noah, but for everyone involved. For Emily, it was the moment she realized how far they'd come since that fateful evening at the Rustic Spoon. For Charles, it was a reminder of why he'd stepped into their lives in the first place. And for Noah, it was proof that his dreams were within reach as long as he kept believing. After the event, Charles approached Emily and Noah with an offer neither of them expected. "I'd like to help you take this further," he said, his tone measured but sincere. "Noah has potential, real potential, and I think he deserves every opportunity to succeed." Emily hesitated, her instincts telling her to be cautious. Accepting help from a stranger once had already changed their lives dramatically. Doing so again felt overwhelming. But before she could respond, Noah spoke up, his voice filled with quiet determination. "Mom, please. This is what I want." Seeing the hope in her son's eyes, Emily nodded slowly. "Okay," she said, looking at Charles, "but only if it's really okay with you. We don't want to take advantage." Charles shook his head. "You're not taking advantage. Consider it an investment in something bigger than all of us." Over the next few months, Charles became a quiet yet constant presence in their lives. He didn't interfere much. He wasn't one for grand gestures or emotional speeches. But he made sure Noah had access to everything he needed to grow as a musician. Private lessons with renowned instructors, state-of-the-art instruments, and opportunities to perform at prestigious venues suddenly became part of Noah's routine. Emily watched in awe as her son transformed from a boy who played on an old diner piano to a budding artist capable of captivating audiences. But Charles's involvement went beyond just Noah. He took an interest in Emily's bakery too, offering advice and connections that helped her expand her business. Within a year, the tiny storefront grew into a bustling hub of activity, attracting customers from neighboring towns. Emily hired staff, introduced new menu items, and even hosted community events where local musicians performed. It was more than she'd ever dreamed possible, and she couldn't help but feel grateful, even though accepting Charles's help still left her feeling uneasy at times. Despite his generosity, Charles remained somewhat of a mystery. He rarely talked about himself, deflecting questions about his past or personal life with polite smiles and vague answers. Yet there were moments when his guard slipped, revealing glimpses of a man burdened by regrets and searching for redemption. Once, during a visit to the bakery, Emily found him sitting alone at a corner table, staring out the window. She brought him a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. "You've done so much for us," she said gently. "Why?" Charles stirred his coffee thoughtfully, his gaze distant. "Let's just say I needed a reminder of what matters," he replied after a pause. "Watching you and Noah, it reminded me of things I'd forgotten." Emily studied him curiously. "Like what?" He chuckled softly, almost bitterly. "Hope, hard work, family, things money can't buy." For a moment they sat in silence, the weight of his words hanging between them. Then Charles stood up, straightening his tie. "Anyway, enough about me. You should focus on your success. You've earned it." As years passed, Noah's talent continued to flourish. His name began appearing in newspapers and magazines, accompanied by glowing reviews of his performances. Music critics praised his ability to convey raw emotion through his playing, while audiences marveled at his technical skill. By the time he turned 14, he was invited to audition for Juilliard, one of the most prestigious music schools in the world. The news sent waves of excitement and anxiety through the household. Emily spent sleepless nights worrying about how they would manage if Noah got accepted. Tuition costs were astronomical, and moving to New York City seemed like an impossible leap. But Charles reassured her, promising to cover whatever expenses they couldn't afford. "Don't worry about the details," he told her firmly. "Just let him shine." When the acceptance letter arrived, the family celebrated with tears and laughter. Noah hugged his mom tightly, his face glowing with pride. "We did it, Mom," he whispered. "Together." Preparations for the move began immediately. Emily sold the bakery, knowing it was time to prioritize her son's future. Charles arranged for housing in the city and helped navigate the logistics of relocating. On the day they left their small town behind, Emotions ran high. Neighbors gathered to say goodbye, sharing hugs and well wishes. The diner staff threw a farewell party, complete with cake and heartfelt speeches. As they drove away, Emily glanced back at the familiar streets one last time. Her heart ached with nostalgia, but also swelled with gratitude. They were leaving, behind a chapter of their lives, but they were stepping into something extraordinary. In New York, Noah threw himself into his studies, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. Juilliard was challenging, pushing him to his limits, but he thrived under pressure. Emily adjusted to city life, finding work as a pastry chef at a trendy cafe. Though she missed the simplicity of their old home, she embraced the opportunities the city offered. Charles visited occasionally, always arriving unannounced and staying briefly. He attended Noah's recitals, sitting quietly in the back row, clapping politely at the end. Afterward, he'd congratulate Noah with a firm handshake and exchange a few words with Emily before disappearing again. His presence was comforting, yet enigmatic, a reminder that some stories remain unfinished. One evening, as Noah practiced a particularly difficult piece, Emily joined Charles on the balcony of their apartment. The city lights twinkled below, casting a golden glow over the skyline. For a while, they stood in companionable silence, watching the world buzz beneath them. "You know," Emily said finally, breaking the quiet, "you've given us so much. More than we could ever repay." Charles shook his head. "It's not about repayment, it's about giving someone a chance, that's all." She smiled faintly, her eyes softening. "Still, I want you to know how much it means to both of us." He looked at her then, his expression serious. "And I want you to know that you've given me something too, a reason to believe in second chances." They shared a look, understanding passing between them without needing words. In that moment, Emily realized that Charles wasn't just helping them, he was healing himself, piece by piece. Years later, when Noah stood on stage at Carnegie Hall, delivering a performance that brought the audience to its feet, Emily felt a surge of emotion unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Pride, joy, relief, it all blended, together, overwhelming her. Beside her, Charles sat silently, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, his eyes shining with unshed tears. As the applause echoed through the hall, Emily leaned over and whispered, "Thank you." Charles turned to her, his lips curving into a rare smile. "No," he said softly. "Thank you." And for the first time, Emily understood. This journey wasn't just about changing lives. It was about connecting hearts, bridging gaps, and rediscovering the beauty of humanity. The evening at Carnegie Hall was nothing short of magical. The grand hall, with its towering ceilings and intricate chandeliers, seemed to shimmer under the glow of 1,000 lights. People dressed in their finest filled the seats, chatting excitedly as they waited for the performance to begin. In the front row, Emily sat clutching her hands together, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. Beside her, Charles leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on the stage, anticipation etched across his face. When Noah finally walked out, the crowd erupted into applause. Dressed in a crisp black suit, he looked older than his years, confident and poised, yet still carrying that spark of innocence that made him so endearing. As he took his seat at the piano, the room fell silent, the air thick with expectation. Then, with a deep breath, Noah placed his fingers on the keys and began to play. The first notes rang out, clear and resonant, filling the vast space with a melody that felt both intimate and universal. It was a piece he had composed himself, a tribute to his journey, to the struggles and triumphs that had shaped him. Each note carried emotion, joy, longing, resilience, hope. The audience listened in rapt silence, many closing their eyes or leaning forward as if afraid to miss a single moment. Emily watched her son with tears streaming down her cheeks. She thought back to all the nights they'd spent worrying about how to make ends meet, all the sacrifices they'd made along the way. And now, here he was, commanding one of the most famous stages in the world, proving that no dream is too big if you're willing to fight for it. Beside her, Charles sat motionless, his expression unreadable but his eyes glistening with unshed tears. By the time the final note faded, the entire hall was on its feet, cheering and clapping wildly. Noah stood bowing deeply, his cheeks flushed with pride. He scanned the audience until his gaze landed on Emily and Charles. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and an unspoken understanding passed between them. This wasn't just Noah's victory. It belonged to all three of them. After the concert, the trio gathered backstage, surrounded by well-wishers and reporters. Eager to learn more about the young prodigy who had taken the music world by storm, Emily hugged Noah tightly, unable to find words to express how proud she was. "You did it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I always knew you could." Noah grinned, hugging her back. "We did it, Mom. Together." Charles stepped forward, placing a hand on Noah's shoulder. "You've got a gift," he said simply. "Don't ever lose sight of why you started playing in the first place." Noah nodded solemnly, his youthful exuberance tempered by gratitude. "I won't. I promise." As the crowd thinned and the excitement began to settle, Emily turned to Charles. "I don't know how we'll ever repay you for everything you've done." Charles shook his head, waving away her concern. "It's not about repayment, it never was. Seeing where you are now, that's enough for me." But Emily wasn't satisfied. "Still," she insisted, "you changed our lives. You gave us a chance when no one else would. How can we ever thank you?" For a moment, Charles hesitated as if searching for the right words. Then he smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. "By living your best lives," he said. "That's all the thanks I need." In the months that followed, Noah continued to rise in the music world. Offers poured in from orchestras and recording studios, invitations to perform in cities around the globe. Yet despite his growing fame, he remained grounded, never forgetting the humble beginnings that had shaped him. Emily often reminded him of this, grounding him with stories of their early days. The diner, the old piano, the envelope that had changed everything. Meanwhile, Emily found new purpose in sharing their story. She began speaking at community events and schools, encouraging others to chase their dreams no matter how impossible they seemed. Her message was simple but powerful. Kindness, even from unexpected places, can change lives. She dedicated these talks to Charles, though he rarely attended, preferring to stay out of the spotlight. Charles, for his part, continued to live quietly, dividing his time between work and occasional visits to see Noah and Emily. Though he still shied away from public recognition, those close to him noticed subtle changes. He became more approachable, less guarded, and increasingly involved in charitable efforts aimed at supporting the arts. Friends joked that he'd gone soft, but Charles didn't mind. For the first time in years, he felt at peace, with himself, with his choices, and with the legacy he hoped to leave behind. One spring afternoon, several years after Noah's debut at Carnegie Hall, Emily received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten, a rarity in this digital age, and bore Charles's distinctive signature at the bottom. Sitting at her kitchen table, she opened it carefully and began to read. "Dear Emily," it began, "I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to share something with you. Something I've been thinking about for a while now. When I first saw you lift Noah onto your shoulders at the diner, I saw more than just a mother helping her son reach the piano keys. I saw determination, love, and resilience. Those qualities inspired me to act, not out of pity but out of admiration. Over the years, watching you and Noah grow has reminded me of what truly matters. Success isn't measured in wealth or titles. It's measured in the connections we forge and the impact we have on others. You've shown me that, and for that I am forever grateful. I won't be around much longer. I've decided to step back from my business ventures and spend my remaining years traveling and reflecting. But before I go, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for reminding me of the goodness in the world. Thank you for letting me be a small part of your incredible journey." Tears blurred Emily's vision as she finished reading. She folded the letter carefully and held it against her, chest overwhelmed by a mix of emotions. Gratitude, sadness, admiration, all swirled together as she realized the depth of Charles' generosity. Later that evening, she called Noah, who was touring Europe at the time. "We need to visit him," she said firmly. Soon, their reunion took place in a quiet seaside town where Charles had retired. He greeted them warmly, looking older but content. Over dinner, they laughed, reminisced, and shared stories about their lives since they'd last seen each other. At one point, Emily reached across the table and took his hand. "We wouldn't be here without you," she said softly. "And we'll never forget that." Charles smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "You've already repaid me tenfold," he replied. "Just keep doing what you're doing, living with purpose, spreading kindness. That's all I could ask for." As the sun set over the ocean, casting golden hues across the horizon, the three of them sat together, united by a bond forged through acts of kindness and shared humanity. They weren't family by blood, but in every meaningful way, they were connected. And in that connection lay a truth that transcended words. Sometimes the smallest gestures can create ripples that touch countless lives, including our own. The end.